There is a new star being laid on the Walk of Fame. The workers are attending to it carefully, with precision, attention, almost like a delicate image that needs to be taken care of with professionalism and skill. No one steps on the star, everyone appreciates it. But as time passes, people start to feel like they can get a little closer. They might even step on the star, lean into it. They even pretend that they are the star. Years pass, and now people are just walking over the star like it's nothing else but a part of a concrete. Not only is the admiration gone, respect is gone. But what about the person behind the star? If you haven't watched The Substance, it is a masterpiece. The genre is horror. There are scenes when you're like, looking like this, like trying to avoid it or push your pillow in front of you. But overall, the horror that you're really experiencing, the thing that actually shakes your core, is something we should all be aware of in our day-to-day life. How do we treat ourselves? Self-love and all the inner conflicts, how we are dealing with the pursuit of something that was imprinted by the society. And you know how society was built, don't ya? By men. Elizabeth is going to turn 50, and she is doing an aerobic show. Oh, let's go. Your hands up, left and right. Yeah, I wouldn't be good at this. She looks amazing, and she looks happy. And all I'm thinking is, one day I will have that happiness when I work out. Hasn't come yet, no. Let's work those bottoms so when you go to the beach, you do not look like a jellyfish. Yeah, Elizabeth would be canceled today in no time, hopefully. But this is her job, her life, looking fabulous and inspiring others. She walks off the set into the hallway. And this hallway's this hallways makes you think, what is the elephant in the room? It is long and painted red. Red. Why? Is it just the reference to The Shining or something else? The hallway itself is representation of all the Elizabeth's success. You see, as she's walking down the hallway, we see pictures of her journey, of her career journey, where she started and where she is now, almost showing us that this is her life. There are people in the hallway and they are congratulating her on her birthday, the big 5-0. But Elizabeth needs to pee, okay? She is in a little bit of a pickle because when she tries to go to the women's bathroom, it's out of order, not functioning, not existing. So she needs to go to the men's Lulu. She takes a deep breath and she enters the men's world. She sneaks in, and as she's trying to, slowly pee, why am I explaining this? A man enters. He is in his late 60s, I would say, or he's looking really rough. Is that appropriate? And he is pissed. He's talking on the phone, and he is clear. They need her younger. He needs her hot, and he needs her now. He doesn't even understand how the freaking old bitch managed to stick around for this long. Okay, I get it. She got an Oscar, but what, like 20 years ago? And he doesn't care what they promised her. This is TV and not a charity. And he wants someone new. He finally leaves and Elizabeth comes out. She's devastated. Her spark is gone. A total contrast to how she felt minutes before. I guess Elizabeth got the front row to how things work in men's world. She is forced to go to the men's bathroom, almost as she is being forced to accept how things work in a man's world. It also shows how an opinion of a man, in this case also her boss, affects her. Before, she was totally happy with who she was. She was doing a show, she had fun, and she felt good. She felt good that today is her birthday. But one comment, one statement, one perspective took it away like that. And that's what happens when you build who you are based on admiration that you will get from others. And if we're talking about men's world, from men. She has a lunch with her boss, and he is just trying to explain her why they need to move on, okay? Why she's basically getting fired. You see, people want what people want. That's just it. He is just fulfilling a need. Renewal is inevitable. And at 50, well, it stops. Elizabeth is a bit confused. What exactly stops? And the boss ain't bossing anymore because he finds it quite difficult to explain what actually stops. It stops. Now, the soft shrimp in his hand can give us an idea. In men's world, it stops when it stops for them, when they don't see you as attractive anymore, when they don't see you as fresh anymore, when you don't fulfill their fantasies anymore. Then it stops. But luckily for him, he is saved by another older white man that enters the restaurant, so he just gets up and goes to greet him. Behind him is a mess. It's like a toddler has been eating. It also refers to the mess he has created now. You see, Elizabeth looks at the wine glass, and in it, there's a fly. It seems that the fly is dying, stopping. Did Elizabeth's life stop now? And despite the luxury, despite the success, despite the allure of everything, it was just toxic as this wine is, and Elizabeth is the victim. Elizabeth is driving home and she is, she's going through it. And it doesn't help when she sees her billboard, right, with a smile and how they're ripping it down. It's the end. It's almost like she wants to stop it. No. And boom, she gets into a car crash. Now, the crash is insane. It's like the way they shot it, I was like, make it stop, please. She is in the hospital and seemingly she's okay. Is she though? You see, Elizabeth is sitting on the end of the bed, and while physically she might be okay, she is destroyed. She's just staring in the void. According to the doctor, she's fine. As long as everything is okay with your body, who cares about the mental aspect of your well-being? Though he has to, he needs to say it. His wife is a huge fan of hers. Elizabeth doesn't react. She's still sitting at the bed and she's facing him with her back open. It's almost like she's there, vulnerable, destroyed, clearly suffering. And this doctor is just excited that he's gonna tell his wife that he met her favorite star. He's about to congratulate also on her birthday, but Elizabeth is sobbing. Luckily, though, the doctor gets a beep and he can, go out. What do you do when a woman is crying? It's uncomfortable. But there is another man in the room. It's a male nurse. And it almost feels like he understands Elizabeth. He feels her pain. He asks her if he can do a little bit of a test again. And he examines her back, especially her spine. Perfect. Elizabeth is confused, but he's finished. He covers her up, he hands her the coat, and he wishes her the best in her life. There is a certain excitement and certain hope in his eyes as he's looking at her. Elizabeth is outside the hospital, but as she puts her hand into the coat, she grabs something. It's a USB. The substance. Biz, the size of this USB is insane. Like, they really went out to make sure all the letters can fit in. It's like this big of a USB. Are you freaking kidding me? The USB was wrapped in a paper and there's a number on it and written, "It changed my life." Lizzie? Oh my God, I can't believe it. Lizzie, it's really you. Fred is Elizabeth's acquaintance. They were schoolmates in 5th and 6th grade. And he is shooked. I mean, she looks the same as she always did. The most beautiful girl in the world. He wonders, could they grab a drink one day? He takes the medical results that he receives and he kind of writes his number there. But as he's giving it to Elizabeth, he drops it in a pond. And this man picks out from the pond and he's like, "Oh, sorry, here you go." Who does that? Who actually does that? I don't think this was very realistic that someone would actually do that, but I do think that they are trying to almost show us how much of a low effort it takes for a guy, or a guy puts in to invite someone out, right? Elizabeth is clearly clearly out of his league, whatever that means. But if we play into it, he is even admiring her, right? He respects her career. She's the most beautiful and blah, blah, blah. But at the same time, I don't respect you enough to actually give you a new piece of paper with a number. Now, this symbolism gets stronger later on, but at this moment, it almost foreshadows the expectations and entitlement even of men to get with women, to get whatever a woman is offering. Elizabeth is back at her apartment, and this is a freaking huge penthouse. It has these big windows overlooking the city, and in the living room there is also this huge ass picture of her in her prime time. Elizabeth is standing by the window, and we see a beautiful bouquet of flowers on the table. But as much as the flowers are beautiful, the message isn't. Thank you for all the years you've given us. You were amazing. Elizabeth is angry, hurt. She is standing in front of this beautiful view over the city, but does she feel like she's on top of the world? She grabs the USB and she wants to check it out. What is this shit?
Have you ever dreamt of a better version of yourself?
Younger, more beautiful, more perfect. A clone type shit. The solution is simple. They create this new, better version of Elizabeth. The only thing that they need to do is kind of share. They need to switch every 7 days. And as unrealistic as this sounds, creating a freaking clone out of yourself, a younger version of your clone, Bess, is Kanye the real Kanye? Elizabeth is not gonna take this freaking substance. What the Illuminati shit is this? She doesn't need a younger, better version of herself. She just needs to deal with what she's going through. But as they pass, no one is around her. As she is puking viciously because she drank a little bit too much and her body can't handle the alcohol as it used to. We both know how that is. As she is repeatedly reminded that her glory days are over, and there is a freaking literal ad in the newspaper looking for new Elizabeth Sparkle, she is like, fuck it. There is only one Elizabeth Sparkle. And if they need a younger version, so be it. Besides, what's there to lose? Kids, never take a decision where you join an underground hush-hush experiment to clone you just because you are a little bit in a rough period, okay? It can go dark real fast. 503 is her number. She gets the instructions and bam, bam, da-da-dum, dum, da-da-dum, dum, da-da-da. She is walking in shady alleys. She is looking around. She gets to the garage door type of thing, and she tries to open it. The doors start opening, but they get kind of stuck. Will she risk it and go through it, or will she lose her head in the process? Elizabeth ducks down and she goes in. She's walking through a shady hallway. And finally, at the end of the hallway, a big white lab-looking like room. A couple of symbolism here. Elizabeth is shown to go through these shady, dark spaces, right? Everything feels a little bit risky, a little bit dangerous. But when you have the eyes on the prize, when you're after something, none of that matters. You ignore all the red flags. And this white room with these lockers does potentially look like the solution. There's only 2 lockers that have a number though, 207 and 503. I guess there's another person in this experiment. She is back at home with her package. And Bess, I'm gonna be honest, I have no idea how she understood how to use this shit. The girl is just like, oh, I totally get this. And I'm like, am I the dum-dum here? If I need to build something from IKEA, I need to look at it like 50 times and have clear instructions. Whatever is left for interpretation, I'm gonna fail. But Elizabeth, she bossing. It takes her 5 minutes to understand that she needs to take the substance, that someone is gonna crawl out of her body from the back, that this person needs to then stitch up her back, and then she needs to feed her with the food through, a syringe. Just like that. She must remember, though, they are one. But can one exist without the physical aspect of it. Are our bodies just vessels, or is there more to what makes you you? Well, Liz is about to find out. The younger and the better version of Elizabeth is born. She looks at the mirror and she is amazed. The original Elizabeth is lying on the bathroom floor, lifeless, like almost discarded in a way. The new version feels lighter, simple, fresh, full of opportunities. So she also decides to name herself Sue. Sue starts bleeding from the nose. She gets a little bit dizzy. What the fuck? What is stabilizer? Every day she needs to inject herself with the fluid that she gets from Elizabeth's spine. I guess Sue, despite being the better version, she is dependent on the original. If we look at it like literal medical aspect to it, the fluid that she takes out from the Elizabeth spine is, and I'm probably gonna butcher this, cerebrospinal fluid. Cerebrospinal fluid. Cerebrospinal fluid. Oh my God, that's a tongue twister. So if we take it in that context, this is actual fluid that is very crucial to our nervous system, central nervous system. Did I get that right? Body central nervous system. Yeah, I did. And metaphorically, we do associate spine with almost identity, a sense of self. Right? We even say the expression that someone doesn't have a spine, referring to how they don't stand up for themselves, for their values, beliefs. They just move based on what people tell them to do, right? So in a way, when Sue is draining this fluid out of Elizabeth, it is like she is draining this essence out of her, essence of who Elizabeth actually is. The very need for this fluid also shows how Sue's existence is very fragile. You need to tend it daily, and it also has a big cost. There are two men sitting in a room judging who's gonna be the next Elizabeth Sparkle, who's gonna be the new face of workout for women. Interesting. How does men's input come to play? On the other hand, we are learning that most of the advice, the medical advice, testings how to cure illnesses, how to help people, was only done on men, by men. In this context, though, the men are looking for a specific thing, for a specific visual. At the end of the day, people want what they want. And at the end of the day, we are living in men's world.
Too bad her boobs aren't in the middle of her face instead of that nose.
It's about fulfilling their fantasy. And Sue is perfection. This time, everything is in the right place. The ex-boss of Elizabeth is ecstatic. She is exactly what they need. Beautiful and happy. That's what people want. That's what everyone wants. And he would know. I mean, he might as well be the one who orchestrated the whole thing. He doesn't even care that Sue can only work every other week. She comes up with the excuse that she needs to take care of her sick mother. I'm not going to go too deep into it. You can go in the comments below if you have some, insights in a way. But there was something about this, how he accepted that she needs to take care of a sick mother, right? It had to be something that it's like caring, nurturing. That has to be the reason. And then a guy will accept it. What you think? Sue is happy. The week is going fabulous. She's walking down the streets like she owns them. Sexy, hot, pretty in pink. She is loving it. And there's a new billboard across her window. Sue and the new upcoming show. But the 7 days are up and she needs to switch. It's back to the original. And boom, Elizabeth is back. But her transition, coming back to her original state, was not as smooth as Sue was. There's certain exhaustion around Elizabeth. She's not moving with energy and freshness. It's almost like she is drained a little bit. Maybe that liquid has something to do with it. It might be that it's actually draining a little bit of her own vitality. And the same way Sue left Elizabeth on the bathroom floor, so did Elizabeth. I guess the body at the end doesn't really matter. It's just a vessel. It's just what it can get me, which is a very, very, very interesting view or interesting point. You see, you tend to think when people try to change themselves, especially physically, oh, they just want to look a certain way because it makes them feel better, right? That's our understanding. Many women also say that, right? I do these changes because it makes me feel better how I look. But here it is showing almost as that the body itself does not matter. It just matters what are the results of having that body. How are you perceived in life? How are you getting opportunities? How everything is easy for you. So because Sue, right, this younger body is not functioning anymore, it cannot give me anything, it doesn't even matter. You would expect Elizabeth to be very caring about this body, really appreciating the beauty. But it almost shows that no, what she is after is what this beauty gets her. I want to also talk about the symbolism of the bathroom. Now, the bathroom is very medical looking, like white. And this is where transformation happens. This is where this creation of the ideal version happens. If we pair it with the symbolism of hallways that we see throughout the movie, even in Elizabeth's house, the path to get to this bathroom is a big, long-ass hallway. And it does look like this bathroom is almost that deep, deep inner part of herself. Bright, innocent, raw place where everything happens. Switch between the authentic version and the ideal version is happening deep, deep down. It almost challenges you to think about when we are creating these ideal versions or better versions, are we really just doing it on the surface? For example, you have a certain persona when you're at work, or you have like Sasha Fierce, a certain persona on stage. Deep down, you know who you are. When you are alone, you are your true self and blah, blah, blah. Or is this change actually also happening deep, deep down? Your core true self, having this split thing of authentic and ideal, and how do they battle? On the other hand, we also see that, when Sue is living, Elizabeth is left in the bathroom. Like the authentic self is left hidden deep, deep down while Sue goes on the surface, and then they switch. There is also the element of specifically the bathroom floor. Mary, what do you think when you think about lying on the bathroom floor? Don't tell me you feel fabulous. You were probably just puking, okay? Or you were just going through it. The bathroom floor is almost a low point, degrading in a way, right? That's how we associate the bathroom floor. So leaving the body there, be it Sue or be it Elizabeth, it again shows, emphasizes this attitude towards the body that Elizabeth has, or towards the ideal version that Elizabeth actually has. And also, no matter the version, if you're pursuing something else, if you created another version of yourself, at one point or another, both of these versions will be powerless, will be almost degrading in a way, right? Sue doesn't mean anything when the original is up. And the original doesn't mean anything when the ideal is up. The key here is that they are one. So when they both experience the ideal version and the authentic version, Sue and Elizabeth, when they experience this feeling powerless, being on the bathroom floor, it's actually Elizabeth going through this. Having this moment of her dignity taken away just because of this play between ideal and the authentic her. Now, if I put all of this together, the bathroom representing that true raw part in ourselves and the hallway being this dark, we could say that deep down, there is something that Elizabeth needs to address. Her not feeling good enough. That's why in that vulnerable space, she creates a better version of herself. Hidden behind the dark is the actual problem, is what she actually needs to address. The hallway is just maybe fear, paranoia, dodgy places. And she might think, oh, this is just something that I need to overcome. But the real issue is lying in that raw space, in that space when she doesn't feel good enough. That's why she needs a better version. Even if you say that this place is behind this huge ass hallway, it's actually the thing that reveals everything the most. It's hidden, but it's actual truth. Elizabeth is living her week, and it is the total opposite of Sue. While Sue is walking the streets with certain confidence, Elizabeth is hiding. She's almost paranoid a little bit. She goes to the company she was fired from, to get her stuff, and the boss is more than excited to hand everything to her and also give her a little gift. Something that is suitable for someone like her. His wife also loves it. Later on, we found out that this gift is actually a cooking book. And looking from that perspective, we see this moment almost as how this society sees when you have a purpose and when you don't have a purpose anymore, and how it is associated with success, and then how success is based on your youth and beauty and so on. So it's almost like so far Elizabeth had a purpose, but now when she is fired or retired, now there's no purpose anymore. Now there's just redundancy in her life. Just be at home and cook. The hallway that was once filled with Elizabeth's accomplishments is now empty. Everything she built seems to just disappear, not matter anymore. She's at the end of her lifetime, quotes, and yet there's nothing there anymore. Everything was taken away. And again, we see somewhat of a duality and the perception of having two lives. Elizabeth does not just have one life that she is living. It's almost like her success and career was one life, it ended, and now a new life is to begin. It could also represent how we ourselves are looking at life in two pieces. Young versus old, success versus no success. But all in all, the message that is the most clear, let's say, is how when you build your life based on external validation, it can quickly be taken away. The second you don't have that validation anymore, also your life in a way ends. This is how Elizabeth is experiencing it. This empty hallway is also showing the emotional void that Elizabeth is now feeling, like emptiness when she is trying to accept that her identity and her purpose has been erased, let's say. Elizabeth is sitting by her kitchen table and she is marking a calendar. X for her, Sue for the better version. Her life is passing as though it's just waiting room, indicating again how when we create this ideal better version, we start to neglect who we actually are. We start to take away the worth that we feel of who we actually are. Elizabeth doesn't matter to herself right now. At the end of the day, who is Elizabeth if she's not the star, the success? Who is she without that work? And then it makes you think how conditioned we are to not being even able to be with ourselves, right? Now, as I mentioned it a little bit before, I do think that this movie is actually critiquing the idea of the self and what the self is, especially when it comes to you are you no matter the physical. Your identity is something different. It's something beyond the physical. Because when they give us these two contrasts of Sue being energized, happy, living her life because she has a certain physical body, and then Elizabeth being almost like she doesn't have any will to her life in a way. She's almost just waiting for the 7 days to pass so Sue comes up again. They actually challenge this idea. Is your identity really detached from your physical appearance? Or does who you are and how you act in life depend also on how you look. For example, if you look a certain way, you might develop some type of personality. And it's nothing new, but just the way it is presented, it hits you again. It hits you again in another way, in a more deep way. I mean, we've heard about stories. I think there was even a TikToker or something that lost a lot of weight and suddenly she started to be like a completely different person. And then the critique was, is she actually a different person, or are we just seeing her as different because she looks different? When you don't look the part and you are mean, you are funny, but when you already have the advantage of the looks and then you top it with being mean, then it's not funny anymore. Then it's a problem. So it's interesting how the movie is provoking those thoughts, right? What is actual self and identity? And it is Sue's time again. Now, this is where things get a little bit like, what's going on here, folks? You see, Sue doesn't seem to remember what Elizabeth did her whole week. When she enters the living room and she sees the TV on and she sees a dent in the couch, she's like, okay. Almost like this is not the same person. It's not Elizabeth being in two different bodies. It's literally almost two different Elizabeths. She also seems to look at this situation, recognizing that Elizabeth is just wasting her days, with a certain pathetic attitude. Remember, they are one. Is it showing how Elizabeth's beliefs and values in herself also manifest in Sue? Elizabeth sees herself as not worthy living. She's just waiting for the time to pass. So when the ideal version comes out, she's also looking at Elizabeth as pathetic. If we look at it in general, everyday life, every time you search for perfection, what is the sacrifice that you actually are making? To put it very simple, very basic, if I say, I need to wake up earlier every morning because I sleep too long, it's not only that the part that sleeps longer resents themselves, but also the better version looks at this part and says, pathetic. The word that you're building on the ideal image is actually taking away from the word that you feel for yourself. This is the end for Sue. She doesn't like it, okay? She doesn't like seeing Elizabeth's life so clearly in her face and even the body in the bathroom. So she gets to working. I mean, this better version is real better. She's also a construction worker, an architect, a designer. There's nothing this person cannot do. She creates a secret room behind the bathroom, and she puts Elizabeth's body in there. Out of sight, out of mind. She also takes everything from Elizabeth's apartment and puts it away. The picture of Elizabeth needs to go. It's time for Sue to take over. But if we say that the bathroom is her inner, deeper self, what is this extra secret room? Where does that take us? Well, I see it as the parts that we ignore, the parts that we suppress, the parts that we push back really far down so we don't have to confront it, so we don't have to face it. Sue, the ideal version, doesn't want to be reminded that Elizabeth exists, that a part of her who is wasting her life exists, the part of her who doesn't feel worth it. She wants to push it away. But you know, when you push things deep down, you tend to forget them. You tend to deny their existence. You tend to repress them. The same way we might be repressing certain feelings about ourselves. Sue is repressing Elizabeth. She is denying the very existence of Elizabeth. Bathroom is a space where she should face all of who she is, all of the versions that she is. But creating this separate secret room, it's like she is putting away the part of herself that she doesn't want to address, that she doesn't want to see. This room might be her shadow self. All this construction, though, is annoying her neighbor. He is fed up with Elizabeth making all this noise. But to his surprise, it's Sue. It's younger, perkier, beautiful version. And just like that, he's not annoyed anymore. Oh, heck, if she needs it, he can help. There's the obvious commentary on the pretty privilege, right? As long as you look a certain way, nothing is wrong. You can get away with many things. But the second thing is also how his own attitude changes towards, in this case, Sue versus Elizabeth. You see, when in this case, this neighbor thought that this was Elizabeth, he was coming with this confidence and anger and he was ready to confront her, right? But when he saw that Sue is almost an embodiment of his fantasy, he becomes like a puppy. He becomes like, oh my God, I can do whatever you want. Almost showing how he is willing to do anything for someone who looks like his fantasy, is beautiful, young, but at the same time, when that same woman doesn't have those aspects anymore, then also the willingness to do something totally disappears. It's all based on, are you fulfilling my fantasy or are you not? Am I attracted to you or am I not? The same way the boss, right? When it came to Sue, he's like, we love you, you're perfect, we can do whatever you need. Versus Elizabeth, okay, bye-bye, you can go. Almost poking at this facade of respect, because respect only exists, or admiration, if it fulfills their fantasy. Otherwise, nothing. But here's the thing, this is a man's world. And what matters in man's world is the fantasies. It's their fantasies. The value is put on their fantasy and not on who the person actually is. AKA, there's no actual value there. But in this case, Elizabeth and Sue does see it as valuable because that's what was enforced on us. That's how this world was built. That's how entertainment was built, by men and their fantasies.
Too bad her boobs aren't in the middle of her face instead of that nose.
But what about the pretty privilege? Well, doesn't it kind of show that if you conform to males' fantasies, you're going to get somewhere? It's reinforcing this belief that if I get valued and appreciated by men, I will also get something for my own life. I will also benefit in some way. There's a privilege attached to conforming to males' fantasies. And the opposite, if you're not conforming to these fantasies, then woman is not really valued. Then you kind of lose your spot in this world. The same way Elizabeth almost lost her whole life once she wasn't anymore the point of desire. But Sue is creating her own life in this world. And she likes it. Here's the thing though, this power that Sue has in this moment, this power of how she can control a guy because she looks how he wants her to look, I don't know, is very fleeting, is not real power, is not real empowerment, because it only lasts as long as you exist, your version exists in their eyes. And that is basically the whole point or the whole critique of the external validation. Even though you feel empowered by it, even though you feel empowered by followers and likes and this and that, the second it's taken away, that power is gone. So how much is it actual power? And how much is it just an illusion of power? Which unfortunately chips away at your very own self and the power that you could have. Now, I might say something a little bit controversial, okay? I acknowledge that I do not have the experience or the full knowledge about these things. It does remind me of the illusion of empowerment that I personally see is happening when it comes to sexualizing ourselves. I find it very difficult to say, I am objectifying myself, I'm sexualizing myself, but because I'm doing it, now it's empowerment. And to me personally, that kind of flops because the outcome is the same. Nothing changed, just your perception of it. Instead of actually fighting, objectifying yourself or objectifying women and sexualizing women, we fought against how we perceive it. Somehow we convinced ourselves that is empowerment because I decided to do so. Does that make sense? Like, I feel like we've been tricked. Okay, this is my personal, potentially not the best opinion, and I might be proven wrong in the future, but that's literally how I feel it. I feel like there was even this saying or this quote, make them think it's their decision, or something like that. Also, Sue's confidence in this case, right? Her feeling powerful because she looks a certain way, because she's beautiful and young, and there are so many opportunities. It makes her feel like she is the one in control and she's empowered, failing to see that no, it's an illusion because the outcome is the same. It's just fulfilling what other people want. You just convince yourself that that's you doing, that you are in control, but you're actually not. Because the second you stop having this, or the second you stop actually sexualizing yourself, people won't like you anymore. By people, I mean those who appreciated you because of that. Didn't matter if you do it because you wanted to or someone else forced you to. And I think that's something quite important. What does it mean, woman's worth? And how does sexualization play into that? Why is it even needed? Why is it empowerment if I can twerk my ass and have it in tongs and blah, blah, blah. Like, I genuinely, like I said, maybe I'm just, a little bit limited, but that's currently how I see it. I really fail to understand how is that good? In which way is that empowering? The only thing I can think of is this control over man type of thing, right? I feel empowered because like Sue, now I'm getting the opportunities that I can get because I'm satisfying your fantasy. And that could be the empowerment. But on the long run and at the bigger picture, the bigger scale, it's just very selfish in a way. It's very self-centered. It's just what you can get out of it, not thinking how it actually impacts the generations of women, the generations of young girls still to come. It is the last day of Sue's week, but she wants to end it in style. A little party, going a little bit wild. But don't worry, Elizabeth, she's gonna come back in time to make the switch. Bess. Hours are passing and Elizabeth is feeding on her last drops. But lucky for her, Sue is back. Sue brought a company. She doesn't want to end the night right now, just a couple of more hours. She wants to enjoy herself. She wants to enjoy him. And so as Elizabeth is suffocating, having no more liquid to consume, Sue is living her life, her love life, or her sex life. But here's the thing. Sue forgot. If one is dying, isn't the other one also? Sue starts to bleed from her nose and she feels a little bit dizzy. The man is like, what the F is going on? She barely makes it to the bathroom in time to do the switch. But Sue doesn't do the switch. Not this time. This time, she wants a little bit more of her time. This time, she decides to take a little bit more of the fluid from Elizabeth's spine, just for a couple extra hours. Elizabeth wakes up, finally. The switch has happened. But something ain't quite right. You see, when Elizabeth steps into the apartment, it is a freaking mess. Clearly, someone was partying. So here again, we are asked to think about if Sue and Elizabeth are one and the same person, how come they don't remember what the other one did the previous night? Are they actually one person, or because of the physical change, they are also two different people? Does the physical almost come with its own identity? There's a sticky note on the window. It's from the guy. He forgot his helmet or something. He's too drunk to go home, which at least responsible. And as she reaches to take the sticky note from her window, she gasps. It's her finger. Her finger is dried out. No, her finger, honestly, I don't know. It's looking rough. Elizabeth figures out that Sue was a little naughty and the price to pay was Elizabeth's finger.
Yes, hi. This is Elizabeth Sparkle.
Silence.
I'm 503.
Elizabeth has been reduced to a number. It's like her identity is being chipped away. She explains that there's been a little accident, a little misuse, just for a couple of hours, and she's calling to get the procedure to reverse it. What's been used on one side is lost on the other. There is no way back. No, this is unfair. What do you mean? I don't know what it's her fault. I don't know what Sue was thinking. Remember, there is no she and you. You are one. So let's talk a little bit about this what the F moment. How come Elizabeth does not know or doesn't agree with Sue's decisions? How come Sue is making decisions without thinking about the impact on Elizabeth? If we again look at this idea that they are actually one, how come Sue is taking decisions that Elizabeth would clearly not be fine with? Is it true that Elizabeth wouldn't be fine with? Sue is the type of person who lives her life, experience everything going well for her because she's young, because she's beautiful, a lot of opportunities, and she doesn't think about her future self. She is just focused on how she can enjoy right now. But here's the catch. Sue is actually someone who is based on what Elizabeth herself believes in. As long as you're pretty and as long as you're young, nothing else matters, right? Elizabeth herself, after, she got fired and so on, she started to look at herself as though she doesn't value. Her at 50 years old is almost like her life ended. So that reflects in a young Sue, right? Or the young Elizabeth. She does not put any value on the future Elizabeth, on the older Elizabeth. But it doesn't mean that it won't have any consequences. In the movie, though, it shows direct impact. It shows the impact with physical manifestation on Elizabeth and her finger becoming, like I said, looking like it's a mummy's finger or something. Elizabeth believes that she is more worthy when she is younger and beautiful, and she's not worthy when she is old, and that's how Sue is also acting. Despite Elizabeth still existing, it's just that Elizabeth is suppressed. Elizabeth is in that dark corner. In a way, you can even say that Sue is a manifestation of Elizabeth's insecurities. If I'm young and pretty, I'm worth it. If I'm not, then I'm not worth. So for me, instead of looking at this and saying, oh, these are two different identities, right, forming because of physical attribute, let's say, it's actually not. It's literally driven by Elizabeth's core values and beliefs. And her core values and beliefs are that she is worth more if she is younger and prettier. Are those beliefs influenced by society that she's living in and the man's world that she is in? 100%. But it's not like Sue is a different identity. Sue is Elizabeth. It's just Elizabeth based on, are my beliefs and values giving me something or are they not? But the values and beliefs are the same. It's like when people reach a certain success and they would say, oh, they became a different person. Yes, on the outside, they became a different person. They treat you differently, but it's because their values and their beliefs are actually the same. So if they believe that if you have a lot of money, then you can do whatever you want and no one is going to do anything about it, then when you get to that position, it's exactly how you're going to act. But when you don't have money, then you're going to act as someone who doesn't have money and you're going to be like, oh, I'm not worth, or even angry about it. Of course, this person is treating me this way. If I would have money, if I would have status, they wouldn't. And that's a bad person, not realizing that that's actually also your belief. So when you get the money, are you now going to act differently? It's a very interesting topic about this, how the external actually influences who you are versus does it just bring out what do you already believe and what are your values? One might even say that Elizabeth herself, when she was younger, was treating maybe older people with a certain, pity or, okay, you're done in this business or whatever, But because now she is living in real time, experiencing who Sue is, potentially experiencing who Elizabeth was as a younger person, now it hits harder, right? When Elizabeth herself says that, I don't know what she was thinking, she's creating this detachment, this responsibility of her own values and beliefs and treats it as, this is Sue, right? This is not me. I am a different person and so on. So it could even say that unless you're actually confronting what are the things that are driving you, you're just gonna pretend that that's not you, that's an older version of you, that's you from the past, and so on. Is it really though? Did you really do the work? But this little action pushes Elizabeth to sober up a little bit. It's almost like someone slapped her in her face. Elizabeth starts realizing that this is not just about me being older or Sue being younger and having her best life, something that Elizabeth feels like she is missing out on being older. This is actually about her missing out on her own time. If she doesn't remember what Sue is doing, if she's not living through Sue, because Elizabeth is technically a different person with the experiences and so on, she's basically not living. This little accident with the finger might even push Elizabeth to think, well, if I let this happen, if I continue to let this happen, Sue is just gonna erase me. She's just gonna erase my whole identity. She's already erasing my life in a way because I'm letting it happen. I'm not living while it's my week. But now she's literally physically erasing me. It also makes me think that Elizabeth is the type of person who, if she is physically impacted, then she will get the the wake-up call, right? But if it's just how she's feeling or her mental state, then it's not that important. And again, it comes back to what are actual values that Elizabeth holds, which is the physical appearance, the image that she is portraying. When that image is hurt, when the finger, right, physical thing is getting, let's say, destroyed, then she's like, Biz, we are not letting this happen. Ding dong, it's the neighbor. And he just saw Sue on her new TV show. Holy moly, it makes him want to join the class. Is she offering also private lessons? He was thinking, what about if they had some drinks that evening at his place? Doesn't it work that way? If you're fulfilling my fantasy, am I not entitled to you? Am I not entitled to what you offer? The neighbor does not think for 1 second that Sue is maybe not there just to please him. She is not there to go on a date with him. She is not there just waiting when he's gonna say, hey, do you want to grab some drinks? You see, he doesn't ask her. He tells her. But again, Sue has been created for him, hasn't she? Of course not. But I think the movie is trying to make us think, provoke us a little bit when it comes to when you are fulfilling someone else's fantasy, when you are creating an image that, in this case, men will appreciate and men will dictate how valuable you will be in society and how valuable your life is, they might treat you as though they own you, as though they are the reason that you even have what you have. Furthermore, erasing a woman's worth. It's time to pick up a new refill. And Elizabeth is paranoid, anxious. She's walking like she's fighting for her life. She keeps on hearing someone's noises, like someone is following her. She runs into a nearby cafe.
It's long, isn't it? 7 days.
It's him. It's the nurse that gave her the USB at the hospital. It's just that it doesn't look like him. It's his older self, number 207. You see, you might start as someone who is excited about the idea, who introduces other people to a certain idea, to this perfect thing of being younger and better version of yourself. Are you sure that you're not yourself a victim of your beliefs and your values, and in this case, this experiment? Elizabeth asks him if he was the one who's been following her. And he says that he's just been curious how things are going. You see, each time it gets more lonely. Each time it's harder to remember that you still matter. That the original version of yourself, that this version of yourself is still worth something, that your life is still worth living. Has she started yet? Has she started eating away at you? Elizabeth can't take it anymore. This man is crazy. She runs out of the bar, and as she's running, she's bumping into another guy. I mean, poor lady. It is the man that Sue brought home, the helmet man. And while she recognizes him because of the helmet, he does not recognize her at all. He is actually very annoyed that she is in his way. Move away, lady. And this emphasizes further how Sue's life is a different life than Elizabeth's life. Maybe that's how Elizabeth also feels herself, that Sue is reminding her that she is in the way. She shouldn't be here anymore. It's Sue's time. She comes home and she starts digging through her stuff. Where is it? Where is it? Where is it? Finally, she picks up that muddy paper. The paper Fred put his number on. The words echo in Elizabeth's head. You are the most beautiful girl in the whole wide world. She feels reassured. She brings the paper closer to her heart. There's hope. She still matters. So here's the thing. Clearly, Elizabeth is vulnerable. She kept on being reminded how her life is done, how she is replaceable, how they need younger and better. And then she created Sue, but now literally is happening the same. She is almost being erased. Her life, her worth is being shunned away by Sue, indicating that the younger, better version is clearly not the solution. But how does she respond? She responds by again seeking external validation. She again falls to what has been driving her whole life. How will I be perceived by others? And that will actually give me worth. But she seeks it from a man. Again, Elizabeth's value might be that her worth depends on how desirable she is. Is it the influence of living in a man's world? Now, the fact that the paper is muddy, because if you remember, it fell into the pond and so on, further symbolizes that how this validation is not really good. These values are actually tainting her self-worth. We don't see her having any friends, any other support system. And I think that's quite common. It is quite common that women were always raised in a way to appeal to men. Now, I'm not saying that it hasn't happened vice versa, but I am saying that there is much more let's say identity changes, at least how we know it, then maybe there's a part where, men don't share as much, where, we develop the pick-me girl, the cool girl, and that all comes from being desirable by a man, where young girls are even changing who they are, how they act, so the men will accept them. I mean, even today, how many women feel like they are not worthy if they're not in a relationship? I've talked about my own struggles with identity and that being connected with being with someone else. So that's pretty common, right? Elizabeth grasping to feel like she is valuable based on how will men accept her. We could even say that this is a result of internalized misogyny. There is a patriarchal system, right? And instead of women trying to search for their own values and finding power in that, they're actually searching it from how well would they fit in this society. It's almost like a subtle way of controlling. If you make women play the roles that men want them to play, right, to be in their favor, you're actually controlling them, feeding even more into patriarchal systems. Elizabeth takes the phone and she calls Fred.
Hi, Fred. It's Lizzie. Hello?
You can see on Elizabeth's face her fear and scared that he doesn't remember her. Lizzie, sorry, I'm shocked. Elizabeth is relieved. Okay, he didn't forget about her. He's just shocked. She asks him to go out on a date. And there is silence again. Lizzie gets scared again. Oh my God, does he not want me?
Are you still there?
Again, Lizzie, I'm sorry, I'm just shocked. Elizabeth is relieved again. Now, this on the first look might seem as something very normal, very innocent, but it does show how insecurities manifest differently between a man and a woman, and also how women take on certain responsibilities or certain burdens. If we go a little back, if we set the stage, Fred, when he saw Elizabeth in front of that hospital, he was in awe with her, right? He idolizes her. He's been following her career. She's the most beautiful girl ever and yada yada, right? Creating a certain power imbalance where Elizabeth has the power, right? So this perceived power that Elizabeth has made her feel courageous to call, right? She also called because she needed validation. But when Fred is silent on a phone, this confidence, this initial confidence that Elizabeth has is taken away. Not only taken away, it is replaced by fear. Fear of her not being accepted, showing how fragile is confidence that you source from being appreciated for your success or your looks. In that split second, what happened? Or not split second, couple of seconds, what happened? The power changed. The power was back in Fred's court. Elizabeth felt totally lost, just waiting on how he will respond, how she will feel based on how he will respond, and if that response will be positive. The silence is a trigger for Elizabeth's insecurity. The second she doesn't get the immediate validation, she feels scared. She feels paranoid. She's like, am I being rejected? Now, the next step is, because he reassures her again by saying, oh my God, I'm just shocked, it almost shows how this loop is created. This loop of feeling empowered, that taken away, the insecurities coming out, but then when you get the reassurance, you are again relieved. But then the silence again, you are again alert, and then again relieved. And this loop, how this can become toxic, and this almost makes you stuck in this kind of behavior when you never step out and realize, why am I allowing myself to feel a certain way based on how someone else perceives me? Despite Elizabeth feeling that she is in power, she really isn't. It's not real power, because it depends on the very validation that gave her that power in the first place. That power was given in this case by Fred, so it can easily be taken away by Fred. Now here's the catch. Fred is clearly insecure also. I mean, he doesn't even think, it never even crossed his mind that Lizzie would actually call him. He himself doesn't feel worth enough for Elizabeth, right? But his insecurities manifest in a different way. Though you might say that it paralyzes him also, right? He's just quiet in the phone. The same way Elizabeth gets all afraid. Fred's insecurities manifest in passiveness, being passive, which actually takes away power from Elizabeth. Even though he didn't mean to, he now shifts the power to himself, because he, with his silence, with his reaction to his insecurities, made Elizabeth now scrap for the reassurance. And that's so crazy to me and interesting. And it actually reminds me, I did a whole video about it on the emotional burden that is usually expected for women to take over or take on, especially in relationships, when we are taught as little girls, let's say, to be more emotional, to talk about more things, to express things, and that's okay, while boys were taught to suppress their emotions. Like, a man doesn't cry, a man doesn't complain, and blah, blah, blah. And how that then manifests in women by default taking on the emotional burden when they shouldn't have. When the burden of creating a partnership or solving issues in a relationship is not woman's work. It's also men's. If you pair that with the fact that he gave her his number, right? Which I don't know how is your in general interpretation of that. But here it created again this sense of Elizabeth being the one who needs to take the first step. Elizabeth being the one who needs to contact him, right? She's taking the burden of initiating things, but not only that, also when Fred is, hit by his own insecurities, Elizabeth is the one who is taking the burden of fixing it. Taking both situations together, you can even say that there is a double burden that is almost expected from women today, right? If we say like, oh, women should also be the one who are, making the first move and this and that, I think it's almost critiquing or provoking a little bit. Okay, yes, but what about later on? Is now suddenly everything on a woman? If we made a step forward where a woman should also be the one to show interest and so on, because also men like to feel valued, appreciated, and approached to, that's all fine. But what are we doing on the other side? Are men stepping forward when it comes to then the general emotional burden in the relationship and further on that is developing in dating? So because they are both insecure, it does come out that at the end, Elizabeth is the one who's taking on the burden. At the same time, it also potentially shows how power does not always come in a form of confidence or even dominance. You see, Fred is quiet. Fred is passive, and yet he's taking the power of how Elizabeth will feel. Again, is it because we live in a man's world and men and women are taught differently how to deal with rejection, validation, and even expectations? Now, I'm gonna go another layer, okay? And take it however you want to take it, okay? But this to me is, I think, quite interesting. You see, this whole exchange also showed to me personally how insecurities manifest in men versus a woman. You see, when a man feels insecure, one might say that their insecurities turn into control of the other person, turn into, let's say, in externalized control. For example, we talked about in Love is Blind and so on, where one might say, or Love is Blind Habibi, where one might say that because men are insecure in some ways about women being able to take care of themselves and so on, and what would that mean for them, they create dynamics where the man is the leader. The man is the one who tells what a woman can do and cannot do, right? We have a lot of regions when that is still happening, and you cannot tell me it is because that is the right way and blah, blah, blah. No, usually when you try to suppress something, it is because of fear of losing power. If we go into a bit more, let's say, digitalized world and what came out of it, the whole alpha communities, right? When men felt like they cannot get dates from women, and I'm just being like very surface level, like the main thing that we know about it, let's say, it turned into preachings about how men should be in their masculinity and not let a woman do this and this, and even spreading very hateful beliefs towards women so they can feel more empowered. And if we go in a real, like even very dangerous ways, because there is a fear of losing the family structures or control over family structures, there are even laws that control women's decisions when it comes to pregnancy and abortion, that control women's autonomy. Bodily autonomy. On the flip side, women's insecurities turn into internalized control. When a woman feels insecure, she starts looking within. What I can change to be more accepted, to be more validated. I mean, that's how I said before, the whole point of development of pick-me girls and cool girls. It all came about how can I change myself so I can be accepted by the outside. If we compare it to alpha communities, while men in alpha communities go into the controlling the woman aspect, women, because they want to be accepted by these men, go into how can I please them more. I think that's the most obvious example of internalized control versus externalized control and how insecurities manifest differently in men or women. Again, this is not the whole reality, but it does show how through history, it's not even about who is the weakest or who is the stronger, though it does play a role for sure. But it's almost about how men were always taught to deal with their insecurities and how women were taught to deal with their insecurities. And honestly, both need to learn, okay? Both need to reevaluate. Or maybe even how society teaches how men respond to fear and how a woman responds to fear. Maybe that's better. Elizabeth is excited. Her and Fred are going on a date. Her life still matters. And after going through the whole closet, she finally decides on what to wear. A beautiful red dress. Confident, bold, desirable. She also hides her finger by putting on black gloves. She does her makeup, she looks in the mirror, and she is pleased. She is happy. She is excited. Final checks, meaning go check up on Sue. And as she does it, she stops for a second. She really looks at Sue. She looks at that perfection, that youth, that beauty. She's in front of the mirror again. Maybe just a little bit more of makeup, just a little touch up. Okay, I'm good to go. She goes to the living room, and as she is grabbing the keys to go out, she is haunted again. It's that billboard. It's Sue. Sue in her youth and beauty again, looking right at Elizabeth. Elizabeth is in front of the mirror again. This time, she has a scarf. She's almost hiding her cleavage more. She checks the makeup again and, okay, this time I'm out. But as she grabs to the doorknob, she is reminded of Sue again. She looks at her reflection in the doorknob. And as the images of Sue go through her mind, at the same time, she sees herself in the doorknob. And she's not like Sue. Elizabeth is back at the mirror, but this time she is angry. She's angry at herself, at how she looks, at her makeup, at her face. She's taking the makeup off, but it's all very violent. It's almost like she wants to rip her face off. Messages are coming in. Hey, I'm at the restaurant. Are you late? I know how you stars like to make an impression by arriving later. Elizabeth is sitting on her bed. The room is dark, eerie. She got unready and now she is in her robe. There's a sense of defeat. She gets up, she goes to the fridge, and she takes a pie to make her feel better. Okay, so there's a lot of going on in this scene. The first thing is, when Elizabeth is going back and forth between, being happy with herself, but then actually also stepping out and every time being reminded of how not good she is, could be a representation of how difficult it is to actually accept herself or accept oneself. It's not just like, okay, I'm happy with myself and that's it. There will constantly be temptations or your insecurities coming to surface that will make you doubt that. It reminds me of the effort that is needed to actually accept yourself. This path is not easy, not that it's showing, it's acknowledging. Now, another thing is that when she sees herself in the doorknob, it is clearly a distorted image of her, implying that this view of herself, that she is not good enough, haunted by how Sue is perfect, is distorted by her values, by her beliefs. It's not the truth. The way she sees herself is damaged by the values that she has. Now, when it comes to the whole initial excitement that she felt and this hope, I myself see it as almost similar to how the self-help industry creates a sense of hope. You can be the best version of yourself. You can do whatever you want, right? And that makes you feel excited and filled with hope. But if you don't acknowledge that there are certain things that you need to work on yourself, it can push you even further down, right? Because when you cannot do it, you almost feel like you're the worst person ever. You can't even do what someone says is so simple to do. In this case, we might say Elizabeth got this hope of how her life will matter and how she is worth it. It is sourced from the need to be desired by a man. And then when you cannot do it, when Elizabeth cannot go through the date, through actually going out, then she feels even worse. Then she's like, I can't even do this. Like, I am worthless. Now, Sue is a literal manifestation of her fears, of Elizabeth's fears that she is not good enough. So every time she sees Sue, she is reminded of this ideal that she could be, and she keeps trying to make changes to herself. But because this is an ideal, like she literally cannot be Sue when she is her original self, this becomes exhausting. This becomes draining. It makes her even angry. This makes her hate herself even more, further showing how striving for perfection is really, really exhausting and damaging to how you see yourself. She's not just not happy with how she looks, she hates herself that she cannot be this ideal version. It's not just I can't reach it, it's I hate myself for not being that, for not being my better version. This anger could also symbolize her actual anger towards her own values and beliefs and how she is unable to step out of it, how she is unable to break free from this validation that she craves from society or from men. The final act, when she is seen being visibly distraught, drained, she goes for that quick relief, for that comfort, for that quick fix. And in this case, it shows, which is also very common, going after food. Food represents an instant gratification, something that will make her feel fulfilled. So if we kind of recap at what was happening in this whole scene, the cycle that was created is first she got hope by getting this external validation. Then her doubts were challenging her all the time, right? Reminding her that she's not good enough. These doubts were taking away this newfound confidence that she got from this external validation. When that started to happen, the fear of not being good enough came out even more, making her almost paralyzed to even do anything. And because she couldn't actually go out, that now reinforced this feeling of not being good enough. I can't even do that. I'm such a bad person. But that happened because that feeling or that self-loathing that Elizabeth has was already there. This just created a cycle where she came back to how this self-loathing actually impacts her life. It is Sue's time again. And how is this perfect version living her life? Well, it seems that Sue is struggling with her own beliefs. She is doing again her show, and her butt perfectly grows a bump. Yes, you heard that right. There is a weird bump on Sue's ass, and she freaks out. The cameraman is like, something happened. Is this an indication of Sue's fragile image? Is this an indication of how Sue might be worried that she's going to be exposed as fake, that she won't be perfect again? She is freaked out and she is scared shitless when she is waiting for the group of men who are observing this one shot to determine, is she perfect enough? Is this the ever-watching society waiting to catch any flaws? And even when you are perfect, because the society tells you you are, this perfection lasts only as long as the society sees you that way. The anticipation is making her freak out, is something that she cannot accept. Will she be exposed as fake? She walks out of the set. And as she walks into the hallway where her picture is hanging, we are reminded that Sue is at the beginning of her journey. She is at the beginning of the downfall that Elizabeth later on experienced. Now, the interesting part here is how this spiral of people like looking at the footage, trying to find the flaw, actually started from Sue herself. You see, Sue herself was the first one to notice that there's a bump on her butt, almost like she allows it to happen, right? Her beliefs allow that people are judging her, which makes her feed into her own insecurities. All of this ends with Sue waking up. She wakes up next to Elizabeth's body. So I guess this was just a nightmare. We could even say because Elizabeth just experienced an additional hit to her self-worth, right? That how she doesn't matter, or how she lost the battle with feeling good enough in this life, good enough compared to Sue, that actually also manifested in Sue herself having insecurities about how perfect she is and how fragile that is. Though it shows it as Sue's nightmare, almost like, no, she's not dealing with this at all. This was just a bad nightmare. She's confident and she knows what she's doing. Maybe because the ideal self is suppressing the original self. She walks into the living room and she is shook it. The whole place is filled with empty plates and eaten food. I guess that pie led Elizabeth into having a feast, and Sue will not have it. Now Sue is calling the puppet master. And she's complaining how this balance is not working. While her time is passing by like nothing, Elizabeth is wasting the 7 days she has. She's stuffing her face with food and watching TV. This is unfair. Remember, there is no she and you. But Sue doesn't want to hear it and she hangs up. She comes to the set and she's surprised. No one is there to film the show. And one of the guys informs her that the show has been canceled. Sue is devastated. She doesn't understand why, what happened. The big boss wants to see her at once. Sue goes to the office and she is trembling. She is scared. What happened? What did she do wrong? But the boss informs her that the people love her. They want more of her, so they have to cancel this little show, and she is gonna be the host of the most important event there is, the New Year's Eve. The tears that were filling her eyes quickly go from tears of sorrow and fear and scare to happiness, excitement. She is still perfect. Now, what happens when you are hit with the reality of losing it all? And then getting the reassurance that that's not what's gonna happen. Well, you might just be pushed, not letting it happen again.
Are you in?
Sue is not going to risk losing it all over again. And she knows that Elizabeth would understand. She knows that Elizabeth would want Sue to take this opportunity. She takes the syringe and she takes a bit more fluid. Yeah, Elizabeth is not understanding when she finally wakes up, when it's her time to live again. What's taken on one side is lost on the other. And this time, it's not just another finger. This time, it's half of Elizabeth's vitality. It's almost showing that when we are striving to live as a certain persona, as a certain image, that's how I'm going to get the success, that's somehow I'm going to get the validation and yada 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 status in society, there is a part of you who will suffer. That part is your true self, your original self. Sue has to literally drain who Elizabeth is in order to sustain her own image. She did not respect the balance. She is stealing more and more time from me.
She's a selfish bitch.
The puppet master reminds Elizabeth that she is the Matrix. She is the original. Everything comes from her. And if she wants to stop, if she's not happy with the outcome of the process, she has the power to do so. Elizabeth starts looking at her body, realizing that what she lost cannot be turned back. At least Sue can still live. Elizabeth ends the call and she's going through this emotion of resenting herself, referring to Sue being a different person, and then almost reminding herself, no, Sue is me. And she hits her head, like almost as though she's trying to tell to her mind that Sue needs to remember that Elizabeth also exists. Almost trying to convince herself to think about the original self. There is this sense of self-judgment, shame that she probably feels, the true self feels, because this image self is taking over, because this image self is getting everything that her true self wants, and if you want to sustain that, the true self needs to go back. But almost like she hates herself for that. In a way, it would be like, I don't know, Beyonce will start hating herself because the Sasha Fierce that she created is taking the majority of her life. I don't know why I'm using Beyonce and Sasha Fierce. I think it's the perfect example of this alter ego and then the real person. We see Elizabeth again sitting on the couch, now with half of her vitality gone, like manifested on the outside. And as she's sitting there waiting, she notices a gift on the shelf. The gift that she received from her boss. It's a cookbook written by a man chef. As she's going through the pages and reading the recipes, she's almost gagging at everything until she doesn't. And she gets to cooking. Now we have this imagery or this scenery where there is this duality between Elizabeth as the original self and Sue on the TV. While Sue is being praised by the interviewer of being the new hot thing, Elizabeth is watching and mocking her. I came from a village. She's viciously cooking. She's frying the sausages. And as Sue is telling her story and her dream, Elizabeth is pissed because that is her dream. At one point, the interview makes a reference of how Sue replaced Elizabeth Sparkle, and if she actually herself ever was a fan of Elizabeth.
We're not exactly from the same generation.
So she can't really say that she watched Elizabeth Sparkle. And also, she thinks they're quite different. Elizabeth was a bit more old-fashioned. Her mom, though, was a fan of Elizabeth, and somehow Sue was even forced to watch the show, right? Because the mom had it on all the time. So from that perspective, you could say that there is some type of connection. Now, as much as this scene is showing Elizabeth versus Sue, and specifically how Sue does not acknowledge the existence of Elizabeth and Elizabeth being pissed about it, almost feeling like these are two people and one person just took advantage of the other one, we do need to remember that they are one. So when Sue is even mocking Elizabeth's success, it's because Elizabeth now believes that way, right? She felt like all of her life was taken away because she reached a certain age. So Sue saying it's old-fashioned, we needed something new, it's a Jurassic fitness, like how old it is, it's actually a reflection of how Elizabeth is seeing her life. Now, because we see Elizabeth hating Sue, like really hating her, we also see how she is actually hating herself. Or better, how she is hating this ideal image. I mean, I don't know much people who manage to live as an image, manage to create an idea of themselves to then not sooner or later fall into maybe even depression, feel like their life is not worth anything, almost start hating themselves and hating the image that they created. They almost want a break from it. And to me personally, this is what this battle between the two is actually showing. Despite creating this image because it is a better version and more valuable, because it's taking away from the truth of who she is, she starts to resent it. She starts to resent that her beliefs are true, neglecting that she also fed into it herself. So Elizabeth is actually hating herself, hating that she's doing that to who she actually is in order to have this success. Elizabeth is now in the bathroom and she is hitting herself, screaming,
You have to
control yourself! You see, Elizabeth made a mess. The food that she was cooking is splattered everywhere. The windows are covered with newspapers. It shows the hatred that Elizabeth has and is dealing with. And then Sue, the ideal image, being pissed and hating Elizabeth for doing that, for destroying or impacting her own life. Because at the end of the day, they are connected. Whatever Elizabeth does, Sue needs to face in her own life. You could even say that Elizabeth creating this mess for Sue is a way of self-sabotage or sabotaging this ideal image of herself. Because if she's suffering, this ideal image also needs to suffer. But then again, they are one. When we start to understand that we are losing ourselves because of the image we created, we also want to destroy that very image. We want to sabotage it. This pisses Sue even more. And this time, she is not going back. She can't go back. She cannot allow Elizabeth to control her life like this, to create this mess, to force her to see what is happening to Elizabeth because of the selfishness she has to live this perfect life. She sucks out 3 months worth of fluid from Elizabeth. And she is determined she is gonna live this life as Sue. The same way Elizabeth hates Sue, Sue hates Elizabeth. But because they are actually one, it is just a manifestation of self-hatred. Be it the true self or the ideal version. At the end of the day, the very belief that you have or the very lack of love that you have for yourself will manifest no matter which version are you playing. Are you being true to yourself or are you being a perfect version, a better version? If you don't actually love yourself, you will hurt yourself in some way or the other. It is one day before the big show, and Sue is standing in front of her windows, looking over the city and especially looking at her new billboard, the New Year's Eve special. There is a bouquet of flowers in the background, and the message reads, "People are going to love you." Almost the opposite of what Elizabeth experienced at the end of her career. Remember, before it said, "You were amazing." And now it says, "People are going to love you," which is a very subtle detail that indicates again how Sue is only a potential. It's only an idea. Yet Elizabeth gave everything for this image. Sue goes to the bathroom because she needs some more of that vitality to get ready for the next day. But as she sticks in the needle in already seriously infected Elizabeth's body, there is no fluid left. Sue is freaking out, and the puppet master informs her that, well, it takes 7 days for the fluid to generate. So if you haven't switched, that's the result. The fix is simple though. Just switch again and let Elizabeth generate the new fluid. Now, to me personally, this almost shows how even though you create a certain persona, a certain image, you need almost time for recovery. You need those times when you are with yourself, live as your true self in order to have the, let's say, energy for the ideal version. In a way, this could also show how unsustainable is to live a life that is not your true self. Sue, at the end of the day, even though she's the perfect, better, idealized version, the version that Elizabeth wants to be, she cannot live without the true self. And when Elizabeth wakes up after 3 months of her life being drained out of her, sucked out of her, she looks like Gollum from the Lord of the Rings. Yes, that basically not good. She looks herself in the mirror, and it's almost like Elizabeth needs to face what her beliefs and values made her become.
It's 5:03. I want to stop.
Are you sure? Once you stop, you cannot go back.
I want to stop.
We see Elizabeth dragging her original picture, like the big painting she had before of herself, into the living room. She is determined. She is taking her life back. At this point, we see that she doesn't even care about physical appearance, about what will be accepted in society or not. Now she is literally fighting for her existence. It does not matter if she looks totally different from what she thinks is worthy. It's not even about that anymore. Again, showing that sooner or later, everyone that pretends to be something they're not or striving to be an image that society will accept will get fed up with it, will reach a point where they just cannot do it anymore. She finds a termination fluid and she sticks it into Sue's body. But as she is injecting Sue, she's realizing she's really doing this. She remembers the message on the card. They are going to love you. The doubt takes over. The very need for validation takes over. And she starts panicking. Oh my God, no, I need you. I need myself. Come on, you need to get ready. It's our big night.
Only lovable part of me. You have to come back.
She is the only lovable part of herself. Now, this is a very intense moment. And it also shows how deep-seated is this need for validation from other people. When she says that this is the only lovable part of herself, despite having this hatred against Sue, despite wanting to take over her life back, at the end of the day, she identified herself with this idealized version. Even though she does accept that these are two, like that it's taking away from her original self, her matrix self, she still very much is dependent on Sue. And I think it shows this blurred line between who you are and preserving that and actually identifying yourself with the idealized version. If I take again Beyonce, the easiest example, she might say, oh, I know who I am as Beyonce and I know who Sasha Fierce is. But the question is, can you actually separate the two, or does the idealized version bleed into your true self and suddenly you cannot exist without it? I also heard a lot of comparison to substance abuse and the cycle of addiction, where you basically become dependent on that even though you know it is hurting you. I mean, you can even say that seeking validation is addictive. Elizabeth now tries to switch. And as her blood is going to Sue's body, it's working. Sue is waking up. The true self and the image self are face to face, both alive and both shocked by the existence of the other. As Sue is staring at Elizabeth, she notices the termination fluid and it hits her. Elizabeth just tried to kill her. She launches at Elizabeth because if someone's gonna die, it's gonna be Elizabeth. Now this turns into Sue having some freakish ass hero villain superpowers. She got injected with, what was the fluid in The Boys? She is fighting Elizabeth like nothing. At one point, they are in the bathroom, the place where it all started, the place where the ideal image was created, the place where Sue was created. They're back there now, the ideal self, in this case, Sue, taking over Elizabeth, taking over her authentic self. The fact that Sue is freakishly strong and she is literally overpowering Elizabeth with ease shows how once just a tool, just an image to get you what you want in life. Remember, Sue was created so Elizabeth could be successful again. So Elizabeth could still be a part of society and be valued. Became the very killer of Elizabeth's own self. In a way, it shows that the facade that we create can actually, at the end, erase us. Is not only the facade, is actually who you are left with. And this power that Sue has is almost a manifestation of the value and the power someone has from being valued by the society. Power that Elizabeth gave to Sue because she herself believes that that's more worthy and more valuable. Elizabeth is down, but Sue doesn't stop. She keeps on kicking and kicking and kicking until Elizabeth just doesn't move anymore. She is lifeless. And for a second, it feels like Sue snaps out of the trance and sees what she just did. She killed Elizabeth. Tears are falling from her eyes, but then she remembers. They are going to love you. She snaps out of it and focuses on what's important. Now this whole scene, Elizabeth and Sue fighting, and at the end, Sue actually eliminating Elizabeth, serves as a reminder of how when you are pursuing an image, a persona that is accepted based on external validation, leads to self-destruction, leads to actually losing who you are. Sue has a show to do. She goes to the company, and as she is about to go out to film, she actually doesn't feel like herself. Everything feels a little bit distorted, like she's not herself. She runs to the bathroom to collect herself, and a tooth falls out. She is petrified. Her eyes are filled with tears as she is grasping the horror of what is happening. She starts pulling teeth out of her mouth one by one. She can't believe it. She is losing her beauty. When she looks at her tooth in the palm, the image is quite interesting. It's this perfect white tooth covered in blood, almost showing how perfection is fragile. This perfect tooth just fell out. and how this perfection is now tainted. For those of you who are interested in dream analysis and so on, you might have dreamt about how you're losing your teeth, right? And then you Googled, what does it mean? And it usually talks about self-worth and the connection you have with your identity. So in a way, it's also showing how Sue is losing her own identity because her image cannot sustain without who she truly is. As Sue is going through the mix of scare and sorrow and terror of how she is pulling her teeth out, she remembers.
Have you ever dreamt of a better version of yourself?
There's still some activator left. I can use it. I can be a better version of myself. That's all I need for this show to happen. I just need to go home and I need to inject myself and I will be better. I will be more perfect. As she is running out of the building, she gets stopped. It's the big boss with a bunch of white old men, the shareholders. They are so excited to meet her. Sue has no chance but to turn around. The boss is a little bit confused. Is something wrong?
So smile! That's what we want tonight!
Pretty girls should always smile. And in a way, how she has her mouth closed and smiles, it almost pokes at the reality of how it's good if your mouth is closed. The reality of how all they need is someone who looks a certain way and is happy. She finally gets home and she injects herself with the activator. That's all she needs. She's gonna be the better version and show will go on. She's looking at the mirror and she is begging for this to work. She is desperate for this to work and boom, she falls on the ground. The back splits open and another version is coming out. This time, what is born is the monstro Elisa Sue. The body is totally disformed. There are two heads, a couple of tits, but basically they're leaning into this grotesqueness, right? It is a horror movie at the end of the day. Monstro Elisa Sue puts on her beautiful blue dress. And she's looking herself in the mirror, putting also a jewelry, just stucking it in her head. She goes to the big picture of Elizabeth and she rips away the face and put it on her face. She is satisfied. She is accepting who she is. She also emphasizes the smile on the picture with the lipstick. Pretty girls always smile. Monstro Elisa Sue goes back to the building where the show is filmed. As Monstro Elisa Sue is going and walking through that hallway, she is reminded how perfect she is. There's a bunch of people congratulating her, saying how they love her. But the next second, she realizes there's actually no one there. No one is cheering her on. No one appreciates what she became for them. We cut to the live audience that is waiting for the show to start. And we even see a young girl dressed up as Sue being influenced early on. There are also showgirls on the stage and they are flaunting their fit behinds, their pink feathers and wearing no bra. Perfect perky breasts. Oh, you'll not be disappointed. She is my most beautiful creation. I shaped her for success. The big boss is bragging to his shareholders. They're all excited to see his creation. So this is again reminding us that we need to drink water. No, I need to drink water. But basically, this is again reminding us how these idealized version, in this case, Sue, right? It's not created for Sue or Elizabeth herself. It is created for business. It is created for profit. It doesn't even exist because that is actually the perfect thing. It exists because it makes money. It makes money for someone. In this case, women being objectified when it comes to entertainment industry is because it brings money. In a way, not sex sells, but fantasy sells. The lights go down. It's time for show to start. As Elizabeth is walking on the stage towards the microphone, dragging her organs behind her, when the lights hits her, everyone freezes for a second. What the fuck is this? The showgirls are looking at one another. What the F is happening? Almost like waiting for Sue to do something. Monstro Elizabeth Sue starts talking, but her voice is distorted. No one really understands her. And at one point, also, the picture that she put on her face falls down. Now she is standing there, bare, raw, vulnerable, for everyone to see. And she also grows a new boob. The crowd is confused looking at the stage, looking at what was supposed to be Sue. One person jumps out of the crowd, monster, blah, blah, blah. And the whole hell breaks loose. Monster Elizabeth Sue is confused. Please don't be afraid of me. It's me. It's Elizabeth. But no one can actually hear her or understand her. No one cares to hear her or understand her. They just see a monster. Some men run to the stage and they start pushing Mess. Monster Eliza Sue. M-E-S. Is it also mess? Freak! Monster. Mess is just looking around and she doesn't understand what is happening. Why are people doing this to her? What did she do? They shouldn't be afraid. It's okay. And at one point, someone just cuts her head off. The head falls down. But it's not the end of Monstro Elisa Sue. She starts crawling towards the very star on the Walk of Fame. And by the time she reaches it, it's only the face of original Elizabeth on the paywalk. The face smiles. Elizabeth smiles. She is happy. She is the star again. Is this how Elizabeth was created and ultimately taken down by the pursuit for validation? The very thing that she was taught matters. Let me know in the comments below. What did you think about the substance? And at the end of the day, did it make you rethink the self-love you are holding? And at the end of the day, did it remind you to trust your individuality?